Today I give you one of the best chicken soups I've ever tasted, and I know you'll agree with me when you try this recipe, which comes to us all the way from Georgia, not the state, but the country of Georgia, which is positioned between Europe and Asia, and that explains the flavors that are going into and coming out of this dish. We'll start with a whole chicken, some carrots, celery, onion, some butter, some flour, coriander powder, the juice of about 2 lemons, a couple of bay leaves, a cinnamon stick, a shot of vermouth, and a bulb of garlic, and 2 ingredients that didn't fit on my cutting board, a bunch of cilantro, and 6 eggs. You'll begin by rough chopping your carrots, celery, and onions. Cut 1 onion into quarters, and the other into roughly ½ pieces. Following this, you'll cut the stems off of your cilantro, and save them for making the broth. We'll use the cilantro leaves to garnish later. And next we'll take a whole bulb of garlic, and cut off the top of it like so. And by the top I mean the gathered end, not the end with the small roots. To prepare our whole chicken, we first have to separate the breast meat from the whole bird. We do this because we'll be cooking the breast meat for a shorter time, so it doesn't dry out. You don't have to be too precise here, just follow the line along the breastbone between the breasts. Cut very carefully from front to back, and then once you reach the back of the breast, just above the leg, you'll want to separate it from the skin there, and then come around, and you'll finish off just above the wing. You may leave some white meat behind, and that's okay. Just try to remove as much as you can. After this, place the rest of the chicken in a large stock pot and add enough water to cover the chicken. Set your heat on high to bring the water to a boil and add your cilantro stems, your quartered onion, your bay leaves, your stick of cinnamon, whole bulb of garlic, and your coriander powder, and give it all a good mix to help the ingredients submerge better in the water. While waiting for the water to boil, slice your lemons and juice them. My 2 lemons yielded the exact amount required here. Once your water comes to a boil, reduce the heat to about medium-low and let it simmer for 30 minutes. Don't go too far away, and remember to skim off any impurities that rise to the top. After 30 minutes, add your chicken breasts and bring everything back to a boil, then reduce the heat back to a simmer and cook for another 30 minutes. Just before the broth is finished, you'll begin preparing your egg yolks. Crack all 6 eggs into a bowl and using your hands, gently separate the yolks like so. You can use the eggshell method if you like as well. When your broth is done, after cooking for 1 hour, remove the chicken and garlic from the broth. Once the chicken has cooled to touch, remove as much of the meat as you can and cut it into spoonable sized pieces. Next, strain the broth into a separate container. Then, lightly wipe out the stock pot you just used, and in it, melt some butter with a splash of olive oil on medium heat. Remember, the oil keeps the butter from burning or browning too quickly. Then add your carrots, celery, and onions. The celery isn't a traditional ingredient. I add it for its aroma, which creates some more depth in my opinion, so you could leave it out. Give it all a good stir and add 2 good pinches of salt and a little fresh cracked black pepper. You're going to cook these on medium to medium-low heat, stirring occasionally for about 15 minutes or until the vegetables have softened and created a little caramelization on the bottom of the pot, or what is known as the fond. After the vegetables have been cooked, stir in 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour and cook the flour for a minute or 2 to take off the raw edge. Once the flour is cooked, you'll add your shot of dry, white vermouth and stir to loosen some of the fond. Let the vermouth cook for a few minutes to burn off the alcohol, then add about 2 cups of your broth. You don't want to add too much at first because you want to stir and be able to see and break apart any clumps of flour. Add the rest of your broth and let it simmer on low while you get ready to finish up your soup. You'll have already cut up your cooked chicken and roughly chopped your cilantro, so next you'll take the garlic you cooked in the broth and squeeze out the cloves from the husks. Along with the chicken, you'll add this to the broth. Alright, now we're going to prep the egg yolks. First, turn off the heat on the broth. This is very important. Next, add your lemon juice to your egg yolks and whisk well until blended and turns out something like this. Then, very carefully, add a little bit of hot broth into the yolks and whisk the whole time, and a little more a little bit later. Slowly incorporating the hot broth makes sure that the yolks don't just cook, but instead are tempered and become creamy and silky. If you just put the eggs in the broth, they would separate and be something more like egg drop soup, which is also awesome. Now that your broth is ready, with your chicken and garlic added, and the heat turned off, you'll pour your egg yolk solution into the broth, and watch as the magic happens. Of course, your final step will be to add more salt to taste. And what you end up with is a very aromatic, very silky smooth, and very deep in flavor soup. that tastes at once rich, light, and bright. Oh, and don't forget to garnish with cilantro. Please subscribe, and thank you so much for watching.